today we answer the burning question, the question that is debated from every corner of the globe regarding the two Eversolo, the DMP-A6, and of course its more expensive Master Edition. And the question really is it worth spending the extra money on the Master Edition? Or does the Standard Edition just make more sense? Well, we have the answer, and we will reveal the shocking truth very shortly. Please stay tuned, it's coming right up. So here we are, the second in our series of streamer shootout blind testing, and it is completely blind. Just to reiterate, the staff here have no idea or had no idea which device they were listening to. They only knew it is referred to as device A or indeed device B. Other than that, everything else was exactly the same. So we used identical interconnects on both Eversolo models, and we used exactly the same Ethernet cables, which you will see in the description below. I will detail every component that was used in this test. We used Roon as the means for replaying music, and we used Qobuz to replay the tracks that we had chosen to let our staff here decide which they preferred. And it's really important to put this in here that everything is about personal taste. Let's be honest, as was the case, you know, some might prefer one device to the other. And a lot of that really depends on what we like as individuals, and that, I guess, is one of the amazingly brilliant things about HiFi, is that we all like something different. Otherwise, of course, we'd all have exactly the same devices, components, speakers, and so on that were identical in sound. So thankfully, we live in a world of different hues, textures, flavors, and so on. So it makes audio such an interesting place to be. So we set off on this quest to really establish the very much talked about Eversolo devices and trying to answer the questions that we see in social media. It's probably one of the most debated devices, I think, I can ever remember in the years that I've been involved in this industry, and certainly one that's provoked some fairly intense discussion. So first of all, let's talk about the main differences between the two devices before we actually get into the testing. And in the UK, the price differential is around £400. And what does that actually get you apart from the gold badging? So just to make sure I get this right, I did make a slight mistake in a previous video, which was obviously corrected in editing, but however, I want to get the correct name for this. So gold badges aside, and obviously I did mention the very funny post that I saw on social media where someone said they'd upgraded their standard edition with the gold badges and it already sounded much better. But let's just park that joke for a second and talk about what you get. So, on the Master Edition, you get a vastly improved clock system. It's the Acusilian femtosecond oscillators, which have noise reduction and improved jitter. Now, if you understand anything about digital, one of the biggest things that CD manufacturers or CD player manufacturers tried to reduce was jitter, because jitter creates effectively errors in the music. And it is that level of jitter that can also increase things like distortion and so on, and give you a difference between an accurate sound and a less accurate sound. So there's the first difference. The second is in the op amps. As I got them the wrong way round last time, the Master Edition has the 1612 op amps, which again are ultra low noise and ultra low distortion, versus the 1642 in the Standard Edition. So there's the differences. Aesthetically, they're the same apart from the gold badging. Everything else is exactly the same. So some people don't like the gold badging. I get that, it's a personal thing. But really what we are here to establish is which device sounds the best. So let's have a quick look at what happened in the showroom, and then let us get right down to the nitty-gritty of the actual voting itself. It was very interesting to hear the differences between the two devices and across different tracks. I would say for me personally, it started to paint a very clear picture in terms of the performance differential between the two. And I would say, based on the feedback that we had collectively as a team, and as I say, it was a blind test, that discussion was quite fascinating in itself, and I'll come to that in a minute once we reveal the scoring. So let's find out, let us find out who wins this head-to-head, and whoever wins it, why did they win it? So let's bring up the scoring. So there we go, and I guess the shocking truth really is that actually, and much to maybe perhaps the disappointment of some people out there where I see this debated, it really is worth spending the extra money. The biggest difference that I heard would be in terms of refinement. The Master Edition sounds warmer, and when I say warmer, I don't mean boring or rolled off or dull in any way. It maintains the sonic characteristics that I know a lot of you already love about the Standard Edition A6. But without question, the Master Edition definitely sounded better, and 5-2 is a pretty large majority, and I guess in a way it's reassuring to know that if you do decide to spend that extra money, you are getting something very tangible, because those clock upgrades are not insignificant, as is the op amp upgrades as well. Whether, you could live very happily with the Standard Edition, there is no question about that at all. It's a great device, and in fact, in the next test, we're going to have a slight change. We're going to extend this by a week, and I'll explain to you why in a second. We feel that from last week's test, it was kind of a David and Goliath scenario. So next week, we're actually going to put the Standard Edition up against the Volumio Primo that we did last week. It's a fairer comparison. The price points are almost identical. The Volumio is slightly less expensive. And we're going to do it in two ways. We're going to do the test again with Roon, using Roon as the means by which to establish a difference. But then, very importantly, we're going to use the device's own apps. Now that might seem a fairly moot point, but it's fair to say that apps do make a difference. Hence, again, we would use the same app to control everything, whether it be Roon or anything else that's out there that's a DNLA or UPnP software control mechanism. So we'll be doing the two and see if there are any differences purely from using the apps themselves as well as Roon. So that's to come next week. So that's an addition. The week following, it will be the huge group test, which we'll have in there as well the HiFi Rose and all the others we mentioned in last week's video. What's interesting though, for me, it was a very clear winner this time round. I preferred the master edition on every single track that was played. I didn't know which was which, but I started to tell the sonic differences. It was quite obvious. More air and space on the master edition. There was an Adele track we played where her vocal on the master edition was, what's the word I use? I'll say smoother, but I'd probably say less bright is perhaps the right term to use. Now, again, which would work best depends on the rest of your system. That's not to say the master edition rounds things off, because it actually doesn't, and I want to make that point really clear. This is very much a case of you are getting more by spending more. Now, in a percentage terms, it's quite a big price jump, but in actual, the amount you spend to get what you get, I think is good value. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is if you have the budget for the master edition, then without question, that is the route you should go. The next burning question, of course, which we will answer in 2 weeks' time, is how does that then compare to the others in this test? So as we mentioned previously, there will also be the Zidoo, or should we say the Zidoos, the cheaper one and the more expensive one. There will also be the HiFi Rose RS250A, which is a lot more expensive than the master edition. Master Solo, Eversolo, Master Solo, Ever Edition. It gets a bit confusing when you're dealing with lots and lots all the time, but anyway, that's what we'll be having coming up. So I think it's been a fascinating test, and I think we definitively have answered the question as to which sounds best. I don't think that was really any debate, because I suspected, having looked at the specifications, that the master edition should win. It should be a hands down winner. We're not talking night and day differences by any stretch. They both sound great, as I've said, and when I was listening to the Eversolo standard edition on its own, I was thoroughly impressed by many aspects of its performance, and it offers a great deal of versatility. I think there's a lot gone into these that really would have a lot of the competition worried. But there is the question we're going to look at next week, because when you consider that the Volumio that we did last week has no screen, and the Eversolo does, aesthetically I prefer the Eversolo, but then we're talking about sound only, and I think really when it comes down to the point where you're at home in your own environment listening to music, maybe with your favourite tipple in hand, a glass of wine, a cold beer, whatever it is, you know, a nice, cool, refreshing drink of some kind, and you're there for the simple enjoyment of the musical presentation and that emotional connection that you get. The screen has no bearing on that particular experience. Yeah, we kind of like to see the album artwork and all the rest of it, but we can have that on the control device that we're using. The other thing about the Volumio is that when you buy the Volumio, you get free their Premier or Premium software that you can buy separately. Now that's worth about £60 a year, and I guess what we want to know is, does that influence the performance of the Volumio at all? And the other thing with the Volumio again is that it takes a 5V DC input, 2.5 amps. Now we all know that out there are many aftermarket linear power supplies that gives you again another very clear upgrade path. And how would that impact on the Volumio? So we don't have a device or an aftermarket power supply here as I speak to you, but we are getting one here to do this test with. And that's going to be a fascinating test as well. Does that lift the performance again? And if so, by how much from the outlay? So there's a lot, this is what makes it fascinating. It is such a myriad of variables, potentials, possibilities. But again, as I always say, it comes back to what you personally prefer in your system. I have a favour to ask you. Please subscribe to our channel. If you've enjoyed the content and you're enjoying this particular series, please subscribe. It gives us the incentive to carry on because, as I said last week, it's a big time investment for us. And it's not just the shooting of the video, it's the editing and everything that goes into it. And we want to keep providing you high quality content. We've already been discussing what we plan to do in the coming months, and there's a lot of content in there that we know you are going to enjoy. So please subscribe. And also another favour to ask is subscribe to our newsletter, and I'll put the link to that in the text description below the YouTube video itself. Because when you subscribe to our newsletter, you get early bird access to all our part exchanges, any special offers. So, and these are really good offers that only come through the newsletter itself. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this week. Really appreciate the views that we're getting on these videos. Please feel free to share that with people you think might be interested in seeing the outcome of this actual head-to-head test. It was a fascinating test. I'll put the tracks that we used as well in the listing so you can see the kind of music that we're using to test the head-to-head battles. And next week is even more fascinating. I am genuinely intrigued what difference the control software makes to the performance of the device itself. It may make no difference at all, but I guess, and we really do know, those that have done the comparisons, it really does make a difference. But will it then give one an advantage over another, or have no difference at all in the outcome? You'll have to tune in next week to find out, but we will release it on the same day every week. We always release it just after midnight on the early hours of Thursday morning. We'll be doing the same for the coming weeks. So the continuity will be there. You know when to expect it. So tune in and let's find out who wins next. Thanks for watching. It's a great example of more does give you more. And as I say, the shocking truth is that actually for many people who think it's not, they couldn't see the upgrade value, it really is worth the extra. Thanks again. Hope to see you on our channel again very soon, and enjoy your music in the coming week.